everyone. Welcome back to the Brian Book Club. Today we'll be talking about a comic series slash graphic novel called My Friend Dahmer, written by Derf Backderf, which originally was started as an anthology in 1997. So the story behind this is that the author, Derf Backderf, which is obviously not his real name, grew up in the town and went to high school with Jeffrey Dahmer. And I guess from my understanding and reading the background of this is that once the Jeffrey Dahmer murders happened, he kind of started putting pieces together about when he grew up with him, and decided to like make a comic series based off not of the murders but actually of what he was like in high school. There's a lot of things about Dahmer back then that were kind of clear signs, I guess, of what he potentially would become. But back then, a lot of people didn't have the understanding of psychology that they do now and seeing signs of what potentially could end up being something horrible. Now, it does not glorify Dahmer, but I do feel that it's a tad bit too empathetic towards him. And what do I mean by that? Well, in the book, they show, for example, how Dahmer was an alcoholic at a very young age, drank excessive amount of alcohol. They kind of imply it's to hide his urges that he had within him. And he kind of grew up in a home that was slightly unstable. But there's a lot of people, though, who grow up in similar homes who don't end up becoming what Jeffrey Dahmer was. One thing, and people who know me or watch our actual plays know that I'm kind of fascinated somewhat by like popular serial killers, and it's not because of like I find what they do is interesting or any kind of hero worship. It's just the what made them become that. That's what interests me. So I'm more of the mindset of like reading Mindhunter or seeing what drives someone to commit evil acts like that, or what their rationale or what in their head was, to do that. So it's to kind of see the core of the evil, what they became. Not there in no way, in no shape, in no form do I ever like am empathetic or worship these type of people or anything like that. If anything, I have disgust for them and disgust for what they've done, and it's just horrible. And I think I like to take the approach in life where I like to research things like that I feel are wrong and bad, so I can see signs of that, so I can understand where it comes from, rather than just kind of stick my head in the sand and pretend like things like that don't exist. And one thing though that I've noticed, and kind of like different, I hate to use the term communities, but like websites or Reddits or stuff like that where people talk about Jeffrey Dahmer, there seems to be like this weird odd movement of people who are like empathetic towards him and who feel bad for him, who kind of like try to say that what he did is understandable in a way. And to me that's just not true, because if people actually do research on Jeffrey Dahmer, they'll find like obviously he killed one person before he joined the military, but when he was in the military, he raped and tortured people. Like he had military roommates, men who were his roommates in the military, that he constantly raped and constantly mentally tortured, and that just continued on once he got out of the military. So it's not like this was just some man who just didn't know his urges or was trying to repress his homosexuality. This was a horrible, bad person. And he wasn't a good person at all. And I don't find in any way can I look at this person and be empathetic to them. But one thing that I do feel that is a common theme to kind of tie into World of Darkness games of Chronicles of Darkness or One World of Darkness is the fact that in these splats or in these different games, you play something that just doesn't fit into society. And there's different ways of showing that, in vampire, you have loss of humanity. In werewolves, you have, and I forgot the term, I'm not a huge werewolf player, but you have where a certain status is high enough, humans will not feel comfortable around them whatsoever. You have, I think it's called renaissance and mage, where, that follows them around. So there's different things or different elements of these different games that make it to where these people don't fit into humanity, these creatures, and humans don't feel comfortable around them. And one challenge that I've had as a storyteller and as a player is, how do you bring that forth in a game? How do you shine a light on that? How do you show your players or show your storyteller that something is off about someone, instead of just taking the cheap route and being like you don't feel comfortable around them? And that's a hard thing to do. It's a common thing that you come across in Vampire, where, the first time I ran Vampire in 2000, before I kind of gave up on the game, I didn't even hardly deal with humanity because I found it to be too much of a challenge for me back then. Meaning, if someone lost a dot or two in humanity, if I even made them roll a conscious roll, I just didn't know how to handle it. I just didn't know how to role play it. Now I feel like I'm more mature and I can handle it. I can explain why someone's off-putting and why someone makes someone feel unsettled and uncomfortable. And that is what this, my friend Dahmer, is an excellent source for. It shows you as a storyteller and even as a player, like I said, how little signs that you can put in your character to make it to where people are like, something's just off about him. Because this whole story is almost like a shows how Dahmer had this facade of a personality where he tried to, in his case, he tried to be like a class clown or say like off the wall things or act off the wall to where he didn't like seem as odd. Now people though felt odd around him. That's the thing. Some people didn't feel comfortable around him because of that. And so that's why, I read books like My Friend Dahmer, or I read books like Mindhunter, which I still haven't covered yet, or different books about serial killers, because I feel that you can take little aspects of the psychology and the behavior and their demeanor and show and implement that in your game. Because that's one thing, also another aspect of these different games. You'll have your nature of who you really are, and your demeanor is who you put forth onto to society. And sometimes people can see through your demeanor and they can know your true nature. And I feel like in games, especially like Vampire, if the lower your humanity goes, it's harder to put forth that demeanor. And this is a very good example. You could look at Jeffrey Dahmer for the horrible things that he did, that he had an equivalent of a low humanity, and something just stuck out to where people didn't feel comfortable around him. He was very charismatic. He was able to talk his way out of situations where he could have been caught earlier with cops, but in his end, he was still a monster. Now, like I said, though, I do have issues with this book. I rate it 3 out of 5. I think one of my main issues, like I said, and I don't know if the author specifically said in his foreword to the edition of this book that I have, that it was not his intent to make Dahmer sympathetic. But it comes across that way, It can be perceived that way. And I almost feel that the author in this 20th anniversary or the special movie edition of the graphic novel I have feels he needs to say that because it's been brought forth as a criticism. We have to tread very carefully, I feel, in our society when it comes to how we handle monsters like this, because it can be very well misconstrued as we're trying to make excuses for them or trying to somehow condone their actions, albeit in just a little minor way. And that could be fuel for someone who could potentially be like him to do similar things. So that's why I very sternly say that, in my personal opinion, that these people are not worth any kind of empathy almost. But I do tackle these themes in our games because our games are horror-based games. And I feel we do it in a tasteful manner. And that's one good thing about this book, though, I'd like to point out, is everything's done in a tasteful manner. It doesn't tap into the gory aspect of the horrible things that Dahmer did. It taps into before that, or the build-up to it. And there are some tense scenes in there because you realize, and maybe so in Dahmer's life, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know Dahmer's cases inside out. Frankly, I find it to be way too disturbing for me to even read too much about. But in this, and in his teenage years, you can imagine that while these urges came up in his life, that maybe he did battle to try to combat them. And there are scenes in this graphic novel that show him trying to combat the urges that he has. And maybe even as a player, especially playing games like Vampire, you can read something like this and find ways that you can articulate how your character is combating the beast or trying to push back on the beast. Because I feel that, at least in my opinion, is one of the best things about vampires, combating the beast. So if you would like to reach us, you can find us on Twitter at twin_cities_VTM, or you can find us on Facebook at Twin Cities by Night. If you're watching this on YouTube, a subscription, a thumbs up, and a comment would mean the world. If you're listening to the podcast, and if you could rate it or share it with people who you think also might enjoy it, that would mean a lot too. And also a review on iTunes would mean the world also. Until then, thank you for watching the Brian Book Club, and I hope you enjoyed.
Hello, folks. Have you ever wished you could have an easy way to find gameplay videos and podcasts, or just media in general that deals with your favorite White Wolf role-playing games? Or have you ever wished you could find a forum to share gameplay that you have recorded, one which wouldn't be drowned out by random posts and discussion, so that your media could get the attention you want? Well, we have the answer for you in a Facebook group we run called White Wolf RPGs Gameplay and Media. The group is specifically ran with the sole intent of it being a one-stop shop for people to view or share media involving the games we all love. We take thorough steps to ensure the page does not become cluttered and is easy to traverse. We are currently over 1,000 members strong, and we are continuing to rapidly grow with new media being shared every day. Stop on by. We hope to see you there.